Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cook, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast. I'm Claude Werder, Senior VP and Principal Analyst for Brandon Hall Group. And I'm talking today with Steve Lange, who's Director of Metrics That Matter Consulting and Insights at Explorance. Today, we're going to discuss the ever-important and ever-challenging topic of learning measurement. We find that even after years of evolution, measurement remains the least mature aspect of corporate learning. Our latest research shows that only 46% of organizations measure learning for behavior change, and only 29% measure for business impact. Some organizations are still focusing on ROI, which is vague and often meaningless to stakeholders who just want to understand if learning is effective and improving employee and organizational performance. I mean, what does 250% ROI really mean anyway? Well, Steve is an ideal person to talk to on this topic. Beyond his great work at Explorance, which earns rave from his clients, Steve worked at Gartner and spent almost 12 years in learning measurement roles at McDonald's. So, Steve, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate being here today.
You know, when I talk to our clients at Brandon Hall Group, I get asked a lot about how to establish a strategic measurement mindset. So let's start there. What does a strategic measurement mindset look like in action?
I think it goes back to you've got to look at L&D, first of all, as a strategic business partner to the business, right? Where they're enabling business goals and priorities. So we want to be able to map that into our learning outcomes, meaning we keep the end in mind, right? Just like you would if you were in marketing or if you were in sales or anywhere else in the organization, right? It's about, what business problem are we trying to solve and how are we going to get there and what does that look like and how will we know? So it's asking all these questions up front so that you have the strategy of what you want to do and how you want to show success up front and always intentionally, right? So it's all throughout the process of what you're trying to do in learning and development. It's at the beginning, it's at the middle, it's at the end. There's no real end line anymore when it comes to measuring learning. You don't just cross the line and then look back for the next thing. It's this cycle of being inside of it and keeping a strategic mindset towards it.
Yeah, we talk all the time with folks about, like you said, starting at the end and work backwards. Maybe start by identifying the top 3 business challenges or something like that, and then work backwards. How do you help L&D leaders who, I think many of them are still used to starting with the training program first and make that mental flip?
Yeah. It's about being targeted, intentional, and purposeful with your metrics. I tell a story about when someone says, okay, we need to fix XYZ with training. And I say, okay, well, how do we know it's broken? And sometimes, you get a confused look on your faces like, well, what metrics are you looking at today that tell you that this is a problem or that this is broken? And the conversation is pretty insightful because people are like, you know what? Yeah, I don't know. Because I tell them, well, if you can't link it to a metric that's broken, how am I going to show you that something's been fixed? So, so that's where some of the shift starts coming in, where they go, oh yeah, I need something beyond just a compliance metric or a vanity metric as they're coming to be known. So you have to just start with just that kind of a simple approach to, well, if we're going to fix something, we have to know why it's broken. Or if we're creating something new, we have to know how is that going to advance a particular initiative or business goal or metric or target in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, we still see organizations, even Excellence Awards winners, celebrating stuff like 95% completion rates or high satisfaction scores. Give us a practical example of how you've helped a client reframe one of these so-called vanity metrics into something that, actually predicts business impact.
Sure. And we help clients write Brandon Hall Awards all the time. And we try to we take what they have, and we talk about three buckets of metrics: effectiveness, efficiency, and outcomes. The efficiency, those are the vanity metrics that you talked about, like high completion rates, the high satisfaction scores. Those are how well are you delivering something? Are you getting it out to all the audience members you are? Are you saving money by doing something virtually versus bringing people in? Those types of things. And they're important, but the problem is that sometimes that's the only things they're collecting. So you get this isolated efficiency vanity metric silo. But you also we talk about the other categories, which is effectiveness, which is how effective is the learning? Is it doing what it was supposed to do? And we connect that to the outcome metrics. So think about today's skill building. We want to see, are we developing the right skills, and how do we know? Well, we have to be able to observe those skills on the job, or have some type of a job performance checklist outcomes, so that we can attach what we're teaching in terms of building skills to some type of business outcome. Now, all of these metric types, effectiveness, efficiency, and outcome, are important, and you need all three. I take the picture of a three-legged stool, right? If you've got just one, and you could be just collecting all effectiveness metrics as well, but you're not balanced, and you're not going to stay upright with just one leg of the stool. You need all three. Just focus on one or two, you're still going to be a little unbalanced. So that gets people in thinking about, I can do a little bit of efficiency, I can do a little bit of effectiveness, and I can pull in an outcome or two. It doesn't sound too difficult because we're kind of chunking out the metrics in that way.
Then what comes next?
So I think part of that is a data-driven roadmap, right? Something that's intentional in terms of design, strategic focus, technical fluency. It's not just a new tool set, but it's a roadmap that you have all of these things that are kind of plugged in together.
So can you maybe give me a couple of concrete examples so that people aren't just dealing with concepts?
Yeah. So it's a measurement strategy roadmap. It's kind of like, think about it, my instructional design friends out there, it's kind of like how you attack instructional design with whatever model you use, ADDIE, RADDIE, whatever you're using. But, think about, well, what's the skill or knowledge problem I'm trying to solve? Because we know training, that's where it fits. It's got to be a skill or knowledge problem. And then how are those things tied to strategic outcomes? And then it's about, okay, now that I know those things, how do we best support this? What tools or support can we bring to help with either the training design itself, or sometimes even maybe we want to look at how this job is designed. And even if we do the training, is it really going to make a difference because of the way the job is built? It's the same kind of thing with a measurement strategy or roadmap. We think about measurement inside of learning and development, and we think about classic consulting triangle of people, process, and technology. So when we think about, well, what are the people needs for a measurement strategy? We've got to have people that are skilled, that have the capabilities to look at data. I'm not talking about, you don't have to be a data scientist, but you need a little bit of data fluency to be able to do that. You have to have relationships, people relationships. So when I sat in L&D, I had relationships with the HR people data team, so that I could build off of what we were doing in learning and pull through it to HR and talent. You have to look at processes, right? We need new processes. It's not just about loading stuff into a survey tool and then sitting back and watching, but you've got to have governance, right? That's where that kind of falls in with some of those processes. And of course, technology, right? That's where we're in today. Think about everything that people are doing with AI and AI agents and building things into their existing tool set. But you still can't just rely on technology alone. You might have some gaps and opportunities in any of those three areas. And that's where you have to look at, okay, where can I start from? Where can I take something that's small? You don't have to, it's like, the old adage of, how do you eat an elephant? It's, one bite at a time. Think about the other side of it too is we think about supply and demand. So you might have a lot of demand from stakeholders for data. Like, how's this working? How's this working? Who's attending this? Where are they attending from? Where are they learning these skills versus those skills? So you might get a lot of demands, and you might not have very much data for it, or you don't have this, you don't have the supply. Or the opposite, you might be shoveling a lot of metrics out there. So go back to your vanity metrics, but no one cares. So you have a lot of supply, but not a lot of demand. So we're trying to balance all of these things into your roadmap so that you have a good balance between people, process, and technology. And then you're also taking care of the supply and demand issue at the same time.
But it seems to me that even if you're doing all that and you're doing that balancing, the bottom line still is business impact on the learning. And so how do you get people to really get an understanding of the business impact they're having?
Yeah, I think you have to, we hear this all the time, you have to be a student of the business, right? You have to increase your business acumen. I tell folks all the time in learning and development, we are enablers of the business, right? We are enabling the business. We're enabling the people that sit inside this business, and we need to insert ourselves in the business, right? Get out of HR or the talent cubicle or wherever you're sitting, and learn the operations of your business, learn the metrics of the business so that you can start making that shift of what am I doing today versus what does real business impact even mean?
Yeah. And, I tell clients that all the time, and I get a lot of blank looks. I think it's not always easy to do that, especially for people maybe who haven't been around quite as long on the team or in the business. You used to be in learning company, McDonald's. What did you do to learn the business?
Yeah. Part of it was, I'll say, part of it was luck. So the L&D group, we reported up into operations directly. So we didn't report into HR. So we were the business, right? We had to, you worked in the restaurant, you shadowed people, you worked the front counter every week, once a week. I worked the lunch shift at the McDonald's restaurant on campus just to stay fluent in what was going on. And more importantly, just to talk to the managers and staff that were in the restaurant. So it's just about, again, trying to see whatever business you're in, can you get in there? Can you shadow somebody? Can you follow them around? Can you just learn the things about your business? Of course, you can read a ton about your business. It's probably all out there on the web, in your industry. I think a big question that a lot of people can't answer sometimes is, how does our business really make money? How do we make money? How are we valued as a company? So if you're a publicly held company, how are you valued? What are those key metrics and financial things that make your business your business? So you can find some friendly stakeholders and ask them, what are they accountable to? What are they accountable for? Wherever they sit, how do they support and enable their piece of the overall business, and how does that feed into the overall business? Start talking to them about, well, what barriers do you have to get to these measures and accountabilities, and how can learning and development help knock these down? I haven't met a business stakeholder yet who doesn't love to talk about how they contribute to the business. And what this does, Claude, is it helps you become a trusted advisor to the business.
Yeah.
So when you're asking people what their goals are, how they're being held accountable, how you can help them, when you have these conversations with folks, even before they come to you for help, that's a big thing, right? So start building these relationships with folks, even if there's nothing for you to really help them with. It's you learning what is going to help them in the future, and you're building. What that does is helps build two huge things that you can't buy, and that's credibility and trust. So having these regular conversations, showing true interest in what they're doing and how they're doing it and how you can help will pay off so much in the future, because eventually you'll be doing a project with them, and you'll have to be making a decision, and they'll look to you and go, you know what? Yeah, I think you're right. Let's do that, because you've built up this credibility and trust, and you're becoming, again, I'll say it probably 1,000 times, you're becoming that trusted business advisor. You are a strategic consultant with them, and you're not just a check mark that they're checking off on a form.
Yeah, I remember I used to work in the media business, and we used to cover, different industries. And the first thing I told the people who wrote the articles is, you got to go and talk to the business and really understand. And when we got to the point where business people were saying, you get it, now you get it, you understand what we're going through, then I knew we were going to hit a home run with them. I think that's really important. It's the relationships, but also really understanding how everything works.
Exactly.
So let's shift gears a little bit here. How can learning measurement influence business decisions then or drive operational change?
Yeah. It's a big one. It's using the data you're collecting to show where and how training is making an impact. Or sometimes it might not be making an impact. And I think that's where some of the fear comes from, right? We're
Right.
afraid of collecting some data that's going to show that maybe what we're doing isn't as good as we think it is. However, that's where we have, one of the phrases we use in Explorance is data for the brave, right? You've got to be able to go in there and see these things because you might be having a course that's out there. It might be, I have a client that they have a class on leadership, but it's back around, it's leadership, and it's like be like Mike, which is referencing Michael Jordan from the Bulls, when they won their 6 championships, and Michael Jordan was one of the best basketball players in the world. That the context is just no one really, people go through that today, and it's just like a history lesson. It doesn't really
Like what?
doesn't really hit home. So it's not making an impact, right? There's nothing in there. So and while the data for the course is really good, I've been able to show them through a lot of the qualitative comments and things that, well, but you need to come forward and talk about what leadership is like in today's world. And you can use your data to do those types of things, but you've got to be aware that sometimes it's going to come out good for you, but sometimes it's not necessarily negative, but there's we talk about, do you want to revise a course, retain a course, or retire a course? So sometimes we're looking for data to say, yeah, this course it's 12 years old, it doesn't get great results, why do we even teach it anymore? So let's pull it and let's focus on something else that we can take our dollars and resources to, and use your data in that way as well.
Yeah, I find that sometimes learning professionals, if they have to iterate a little bit and tweak it, they see it as a failure. And it isn't necessarily. It just may mean that things have shifted a little bit or you just need to make an adjustment, right?
That's right.
So we've seen cases where the learning team presents really compelling data, shows that maybe training isn't working, but the business leaders still want to continue the program anyway because that's the way they've thought about it. That's the way they've always done it. So how do you handle situations where, the data may tell one story, but organizational politics or emotional attachment or what have you tells another?
Yeah. There a lot of times you're absolutely right. Some stakeholders, they're just looking to validate what they already have opinions about.
Right.
we
Yeah.
we do this even, just as people when we're reading news stories or articles, right? Or sometimes we're searching for stuff that goes, aha, I was right, or, oh, I'm glad someone else feels feels the same way. I know it depends on company culture, what stakeholders are really, are they can they put themselves out there? Like I said, data for the brave. Sometimes if you can find a friendly stakeholder or senior leader, they can kind of help you push a little bit. I think monetizing certain data points can help because that's the language of the business. So if you can monetize what you're doing, for example, we had a time at McDonald's when we were delivering virtual training to what we call department managers in the restaurants. And at first it was like, wow, this is great. Are you kidding? We can teach restaurant managers in the restaurant across the country. They all have the similar challenges. So we need to teach them the same types of skills. And it doesn't cost the operators anything because they don't have to send them to training at all. And it was great. We invested millions of dollars in these virtual broadcast booths, and it was two professors that were teaching at the same time. One would be producer, one was the facilitator. And on paper, it was great.
Yeah.
But when we started adding up all the time it was taking to deliver these, and we were only getting maybe 7 or 8 managers in a session when
Mm,
these things were designed for 15 or 20. And then what they also painfully learned was if a bus pulls up in the parking lot or something, guess what? The managers, they're done. Headphones are down, they're back working to deliver value to the customer. We were getting feedback from the operators, and again, while they were like, this was a good idea, but the execution of it, we're not really seeing the value in it because we can't guarantee our folks can just, be here for 40 minutes. So it was something that while we didn't necessarily put dollars and cents to it, it was a big enough deal where you could tell, like, okay, we're wasting time of two professors, we're wasting time of folks that are getting paid an hourly wage. we've got to come up and do something different. So even if you can just come up with some examples of monetizing something just a little bit, like how much is it, how much are we spending on delivering this and we're getting zero back for it? Or more importantly, in this case, our stakeholders, the owner operators, they were telling us they weren't seeing great value, even though, they obviously they signed off on doing this because of the initial return on investment that we were going to show, but it just wasn't coming through in actual optimization of training the managers in the restaurant. So, we had to pivot.
Yeah, and that gets to, I guess, a somewhat related point when you start talking about the learning's not working. I've heard you talk a lot about wasted or scrap learning before. And in your experience, what percentage of the corporate training spend would you estimate is actually wasted? And what are the most common culprits?
We would typically find, 30 to 60% of training gets wasted.
That's a lot.
Meaning, it's just not being applied back on the job.
Right.
The example I give, because I'm really old, is you used to go to training to get a big 3-ring binder, right? It was like, yeah. And you take it back to your office and it would go on a shelf and you'd never pull it out. It's wasted. It's waste, right? In today's world, root causes are more, we look at them in terms of things that are under learning's purview or L&D's purview, what they can control. But then there's also a side that the business controls or has more leverage to impact. For example, if a program is not aligned to strategic goals or outcomes, or the content quality is poor, like it's not relevant, it's not up to date, the examples are too generic, right? It's not being delivered effectively. L&D can control that, right? They can make changes to that and make those things better. However, if learners are coming in and they're not motivated, they lack the opportunity to actually apply the training, or one of the biggest ones is if their managers don't support their development, the business needs to own that. And that's where we get back to, again, that trusted business advisor. L&D might not be able to directly impact that, but we can supply the data in terms of scrap learning and things like that to show the business and say, hey, the training itself is getting great results, but the scrap is really high, and here's why. We need your help. A classic example was I was working with a sales organization, and they had a training on a new product that was being put out, and the training was phenomenally received. Every key metric was great, except scrap was like 70%. And when you read the comments, it was so clear. Everyone was talking about how the training was so great, but this product that they were learning, it wasn't due to be released for like 2 to 3 months. So it's just a classic example of great training that was delivered way too early.
Timing is everything, right?
And that's something it's so simple to solve for. So you didn't have to redo the training or anything like that. It's just a matter of, okay, we learned. We'll just shift it forward so it's timed to be closer to when the product is actually being released.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm sure in that case, people were they were thinking they were anticipating the need, they were getting out ahead of it, but they got there a little too early so that people just couldn't relate to it as well as they wanted.
Exactly.
So to that end, how can organizations, be proactive in limiting wasted learning?
Yeah. So it is a team sport. So I just talked about how, learning controls some things and the business controls others. So it's about communicating these things, right? So when you're collecting data, don't just keep it inside with L&D, right? Even if it might not be great, you need to be sharing the story. So we need to talk about, are we sending the right people at the right time to match them up to the right training, right? That example I just gave.
Mm-hmm.
Organizations, they also need to make development a priority. We know, everyone knows, you guys do this research too, that every time people leave an organization, one of the top 3 reasons is lack of development. And I think that we need to really change the paradigm behind the role of a people manager. What's the role of a people manager? Employees, they don't want managers micro managing, their projects or what they're working on. They want managers to help them develop skills and careers. They want them to help grow themselves professionally. Manager support can do that. If I'm a manager and I'm going to send someone to training, I need to have a conversation with them before they go about, well, why are you going to this? How do you think this is going to help? How can I help you when you get back to apply this? Manager support can increase job application and performance improvement by as much as 2 times as without it. It's really, I feel it's a superpower that just needs to be leveraged more in today's corporate environments.
It's a superpower that I think historically learning organizations have kind of overlooked, and organizations in general have overlooked, and learning sometimes maybe doesn't feel that they have a role to play in terms of getting that manager involved, but they really do.
They absolutely do.
So what happens now? So as you leverage data, the more opinions you're going to get. What's the outcome?
Yeah, the more opinions you're going to get. Because sometimes, you find yourself, you might be over measuring,
Right.
right? So I always tell folks, when we come in to help clients right off the bat, we always talk about balance, right? You don't have to measure everything all the time. So that's one thing. You also don't need to measure everything the same way. So for example, you're not going to use the same measurement strategy for a leadership development program that you do for compliance training, right? You can also choose to measure a new program for the first like 6 to 8 months, look at your results. You're getting good, consistent, positive results. Cool. Pull the measurement and go on to something else, or maybe just pull back on the measurement. Maybe instead of doing, post-event surveys, you're just doing some quick check-ins, or you're just doing a random focus group every once in a while. So it's about, I always say, match the rigor of your measurement strategy to the rigor of the training. And it's okay to do those things. You don't have to be asking. You're not going to, again, on compliance training, we're not going to ask NPS, right? I don't care if you're going to recommend this piece of training. We have to take it because we're in banking, and there's things that we have to do legally in
Right.
order as a company. So you don't have to measure those things. So it's about spending your measurement resources where you really need to be connecting performance solutions to outcomes. Where you're spending maybe more money and resources, well, then that's where you should also be spending more time with measuring and presenting data to stakeholders.
Do you have, in your experience, do you have trouble getting learning professionals to understand that while there should be a basic measurement plan, that they don't have to stick to a playbook if something's not working, or if they need to make a shift, that's okay, that's part of their job? Seems like they struggle with that.
Sometimes they do, because they go, they're doing the good work of putting this into place. They've drawn that line in the sand and said, okay, we're gonna now do this thing. And then it gets into place, and we think about, like, we preach scalability, right? What you want to do, you want to be able to scale it across the organization. And then they think, oh, well, I can't stop and change this because then it's not scalable. Or I can't, I've been doing it this way for whatever 18 months, and then suddenly we change, and then people are going to say, well, why are you changing? Wasn't what you were doing before good? It's all about balance and being agile, especially in today's business world. When's the last time you saw a 5-year plan out of companies anymore? It's almost impossible because of the way things change. Things
Yeah.
change quickly. It's not an admittance to, fault, or you made a bad decision. It's just, you make decisions at a time and with the data that you have, and then things change, and but you need to be flexible. And that's actually something that we talk about when we coach our clients on their measurement strategy. It's like, that's why you have a technology that you can scale quickly. That's why you have a common set of metrics, but then you've got room to grow, right? McDonald's, we called it freedom within a framework. Like, here's your framework. Here's some things that, no matter what, you want to do these things, but then as the business environment or things change, well, then you can flex things in and out of that framework. And it's easy, because I think about what happened to COVID, right? L&D was probably more prepared for COVID than anybody else, because our data that we show from all of our clients, I mean, our clients didn't miss a beat with their metrics collecting around learning effectiveness for COVID, because they were ready. And their measurement strategy was also ready, because they were already doing some of this. They were already doing virtual training and e-learning and things. They just had to ramp it up. And their measurement strategy kept up with it perfectly, because it was designed to do that. So it's just a matter of trying to stay agile, and you meet the business where they're at.
Yeah, thanks for adding that context. As we start getting toward the end here, let's shift gears a little bit. What kind of conversation should L&D have with stakeholders or executives to align measurement with strategic priorities?
Well, it's about, asking them when they come to us, is it's having this conversation and being open to have this conversation. One of my favorite phrases to start with is, what does success look like and how will you know? You can play, we often develop something we call a logic model with our clients, which is, it's just if then. Okay, so if this is the business problem we're trying to solve, or if this is the situation we're in, then we're saying that training is going to address these things. If training addresses those things, then who's the audience that we're trying to hit? If we hit that audience, then we'll get these short, medium, and long-term outcomes. So we're having this conversation with them so that we can bring them in transparently and talk about, well, what's going to demonstrate impact? What are some things you're expecting to see, to hear, to feel even? You mentioned up at the top about ROI and how, you present an ROI figure of 250%, and well, what does that even mean? Sometimes executives, they don't necessarily, want a single ROI number. They just want to see some evidence that learning is having an impact somewhere. And that's often in the case of stories, right? That's where a lot of that qualitative data comes in, where you can tell stories about how people have applied the training and what type of outcome it links to. So it's a matter of just being cognizant enough to have these conversations with folks around, what are you really expecting? What are you really trying to see as a result of training? And sometimes it is just vanity metrics. You're delivering a new tool for people to use, and it's like, well, number one, you want to make sure people are using it. So I mean, yeah, you want to get some data on clicks and engagement with the tool and things, and that's important, because if no one's using it, then it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. So it's getting that, again, that balance of, okay, people are using it, but now what, right? It's always about kind of, we look at things in terms of what, so what, now what. Okay, here's the what, now here's the so what. Okay, cool, but now what? We keep doing the same thing? Do we make some changes? Do we just let it keep going? Are we going to maybe put it out? I've seen, I was writing some Brandon Hall Awards for a client, and they were introducing some AI coaching tools into their leadership development program, and they got such fantastic feedback from it that people were begging them to broadcast this out further than just their leadership development stuff. So it's like, oh, that's fantastic, right?
Yep.
That's the kind of things where, okay, now we can link that to people using this coaching tool more often in the flow of work and being able to become leaders without just having to sit inside of a class.
Well, that leads me to potentially a whole bunch of other questions, but I think we probably need to leave it here for now. We are going to plan another podcast with you to drill down into measurement a little bit more.
Great.
So, but just as we wrap up, the conversation is never complete. Maybe just provide 3 succinct pieces of advice for organizations trying to break through the learning measurement barriers.
So I think a classic piece is looking at it, is creating a business case for measurement. What happens if we do it really well? What happens if we don't do it? And just being really creating something a little simplistic like that. And then again, it's taking the small bites. We have 4 big programs that we want to measure this year. We want to do this for, or maybe it's a certain segment of your employees, like it's the sales org or the marketing org or something like that. So being able to start small and having that open mind, but also knowing that there is a little bit of rigor to it, right? I mean, it's not like we're not trying to go to the moon here.
Right.
But again, you want that consistent people, process, and technology, and it takes a little bit of work, but it's not a huge heavy lift if you start small and start somewhere. I think people are always, there's always something going on today, right? Well, we're going through this reorganization, or we're looking
Right.
at our technology stack, or we're expanding into this market. It's like it's never the right time, but you have to start somewhere. So you start small and you have a clear vision of what you want to do and how you want to approach that, and you stick with it. You have some leadership in place that can help you. You have a good friendly stakeholder that you can work with, and then you just ramp that up.
Well, Steve, thanks a lot for taking the time to talk to us today. Really enjoyed the conversation. I think there's great advice here, and we'll follow up with more a little bit down the road. I want to thank everybody for joining us on the podcast, and look forward to seeing everyone on another episode of Excellence at Work. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.